Hey guys, today we are going to be looking at trucker hats or structured hats. I've seen recently a lot of people having trouble getting these embroidered without breaking needles or without having issues with the thread. So I'm going to be going over a couple tips that I have when I'm doing hats and I'm running into these issues. Stay tuned. All right, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is hooping. For my Melco system, this is the style of hoop that I have. It is just a single band that holds everything down. There are alternatives like this one next to it. This is a different style. This is from Hoop Tech. I don't like these when it comes to structured hats. I need a little bit more practice on these if I'm honest. With that being said, it shouldn't matter which style hoop you are using. The most important thing is that you're hooping it correctly. If you're not getting these hats hooped correctly, then you are going to have issues with your needle, with your design, with stitch out, whatever. The first thing I like to do when I'm getting these hats ready, obviously, is remove this little structure piece that holds the crown up. You don't need that. And then next biggest thing, pulling out the sweatband. When you get to hooping the hats, some people like using stabilizer. I really only use stabilizer if one, I'm having issues with my structured hats, or if I'm doing unstructured hats. Typically, I'm not going to be using stabilizer with structured hats. Like I said, if I'm having an issue, I'll go ahead and throw that in here. But otherwise, most of the time, I just go ahead and hoop these hats as is. So when you're hooping it, you're aiming to essentially clear everything, get the center of the brim as close as you can to this, get it centered up, and this bill should be backing against this piece right here. Essentially, it is pretty straightforward once you do it enough times. You get that lined up. Then what I like to do is put pressure on the hat so it doesn't move. Pull out the side sweatband, get the band that holds it down around it, make sure it lines up in between the brim and the front of the cap, and get it wrapped around to the other side. Once you're there, clip it on. And one thing I'm gonna note is when you are hooping it like this, typically the hat moves maybe about 1/8 of an inch to the right or whatever direction you're hooping it. So when I am hooping it, I don't wanna get it exactly center. I put it off to the left a little bit. So once it's clicked down, that should be good to go. If we look here, this is the center of the cap. See if we can get underneath. That is as lined up as it can be. This is good to go. One thing I'll also note is a lot of these caps have this little adjustment piece to either give more leeway or tighten it down a little bit. This one is as tight as I can get it. If it is a thicker hat like a puff front, I might loosen it up a little bit, but this hat is not going to move without a lot of force. This is how I hoop my hats. Once you get the hooping down, you should be good to go, and I'll show you guys the other tricks that I have when it comes to actually embroidering. So the next thing we're gonna talk about is the actual embroidery process itself, specifically starting with the needles. There are a ton of different types of needles. It can be a little bit confusing. I'm gonna break it down as simple as I can. Essentially, this is the brand that I prefer to use. I think it's pronounced
Grotz Beckert.
When you are embroidering, typically you're gonna have this 7511 needle on there. If you are having issues with it and you're having a lot of needle breaks, one thing I will recommend is to size up on your needles. So I do have 8012s here in the middle as well as 9014s. This is gonna be one step up as well as two steps up in size for the needles. With those being said, I've recently discovered a new type of needle from this company. So this is the needles that I found that I like to use for caps compared to the regular version of it. These are both 9014s, except for the one that I like to use is gonna be a DBK5XX. Essentially, the XX version has a longer shank, and let me see if I can get this to show. So the one on your right is gonna be the XX version, and if you notice how the shank goes down just a little bit further than the regular version, I think that gives a little bit of an additional clearance and just helps a wee bit. If I'm honest, I don't know exactly what it does, but for the most part, what I've found is that when I do switch over to that, if I'm at my wit's end, that kind of solves the issue for me. Those are the different needle types I typically recommend. Hopefully that resolves your issue. If not, I'm gonna take you guys to my next step right now. Next to me is gonna be my next tip. It is essentially gonna be a clothing steamer, which I use to steam the front of the caps. So typically on your structured caps, it is gonna be a little bit stiff. That's the whole point of the structured material. What you can do is take a steamer like this and steam the front of the hat just for a little bit, not too crazy amount so you're not introducing too much moisture. And once you do that, your cap is gonna be significantly softer all around. Of course, it's not going to damage the hat any because it is just, you know, hot water. And then after time, once it cools down, it's going to be hard again. So those are going to be my tips for you guys on embroidering structured hats if you are having issues. But as a recap, the 3 that I did speak of is making sure that your hat is hooped properly. If it is hooped properly, you should be good to go. It shouldn't move. If you are getting movement in the cap, you might have issues because the needle will puncture and then the hat will shift, causing the needle to break. So you want to make sure it's nice and tight by adjusting your hat hoop and then securing it and then giving it a little tug to make sure you can't move it once it is secured. The second tip was the needles, to check to make sure, one, if your needle is sharp. Even the needles that are sharp can dull out over time, so you can always put in a fresh needle. But if it is that 7511 and it is sharp and a new needle and you're still having the issue, you can always bump up to an 8012 or a 9014. Lastly, steam. This is kind of, again, like I said, a last resort, but I've found it for those troublesome hats, steam often helps a lot to soften it up, to get my machine going. Once it's going, it usually is good to go. Some things I did not mention are going to be like hats. There are going to be some hats out there that are built just really poorly, that for whatever reason you're going to have a lot of trouble with, regardless of, you know, everything else done properly. That's going to be one thing I say to look out for. I've found success with, obviously, Richardson's. Those right now are kind of hard to get. So as a backup, I have used Pitbull caps as well as auto caps. There's some good options there for structured hats. Another thing you can do to help out with these structured hats is slow down your machine. Essentially, a lot of times you're going to be running the machine at anywhere between 700 to 1,000, depending on what you're doing. Now, I've seen a lot of people stand by running the machine on hats at 800, 900, 1,000 plus, which is fine. It works for them. That's fine. If you're having trouble at 800, 900, slow the machine down. Honestly, I probably run most of my hats at probably about 500, 600. If I'm feeling comfortable, 700 or 800. But if you are having these issues, I would definitely recommend backing the machine down to maybe even 300, 400. So if the needle is breaking or the thread is breaking a lot, you can always check the machine and you'll get a better visualization of where in the design it's happening. Why is it happening? Is it going over the seam causing it? Whatever. Those are gonna be my recommendations for you guys today. Hopefully you found doing caps a lot easier, because these are a great money maker. The cost on a hat is maybe anywhere between $2 to $6, depending on where you're getting them. And then adding the embroidery, you can go ahead and turn that around, sell the hat for, you know, anywhere from $15 and up. Definitely try some hats if you haven't already. If you are having trouble, hopefully this video has helped you. If you do have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'll leave links to anything I've mentioned in the description below. Hopefully you've enjoyed. Have a good one and take care.